Why do you invest in a resource?
Well,
you have choice, right?
I don't know. It's just exciting. Okay. I mean, I think it's really exciting. Building something from scratch. That is just whatever it is. But building something from scratch is really just terribly exciting.
We're coming to you from PDAC 2026, where the global mining industry is gathered to discuss the future of critical minerals. Host Joe Webb sits down with Adrian Day of Adrian Day Asset Management, a seasoned investor whose decades in the market bring a unique global perspective. Through personal stories and experience, Adrian shares insights into the broader impact of the mining industry and what he looks for when making an investment.
Adrian, great to meet you. And our first question, just an intro question, but why should the average person not in the mining industry care about what happens in the mining industry?
Oh my gosh. I mean, that gets to the heart of the matter, doesn't it? Because basically, as you say behind you, if it's not grown, it's mined. I mean, everything we touch, everything we eat, everything we wear, everything we play with, everything. If it's not grown, it's mined. So mining is absolutely critical. And I mean, may I give and it's just amazing to me, the sort of ignorance of most people, and I guess because of the propaganda, maybe it's not surprising, but my daughter went to a good, expensive private school, and they asked the parents if they wanted to come in and give a talk on something. So I said, yeah, I'll do a talk. This is to the what we would call the sixth form. I don't know what they call it in America, grade 11 or 12, I guess. So I said, I'll give a talk on mining. The school did not like that because they're very, very liberal. Liberal in the American sense, not in the traditional sense. So I said, well, okay, I'll talk about investments then. So I went in and I said, well, first of all, how many people in this class think that we should be mine-free? No mining at all, because it's dirty business. I mean, 9 out of 10 hands went up. I said, really? You think we should be mine-free? Absolutely. Dirty, blah, blah, blah. Big holes in the ground. Ugly. Okay, well, I'm going to pass around a wastepaper basket. I want you all to put your cell phones in here, your laptops, take your belts off. Oh, wait a minute, shoelaces, please, everything in here. And they looked at me like I was crazy. I said, everything I've just said is mined. So I don't mind if you want to, if you think we should be mine-free, but please live by your principles.
I call it the avatar effect. And it's like we live in this world where the mining companies going up with the blazing guns and blowing up the tree of life, right? And that's literally been what's in people's face about what the mining industry has been about.
Right.
And now everyone's grappling with, wait up, we need to find this special metal to save the tree of life, right? And I'm not sure if that's going to be Avatar 6 or 10, but at some point in time, we're heading towards that. And the world's got this balance. And it's like, it's built this world. It's like this future world of net zero emissions, all these things have happened. They built this future world saying, we want to go, we want to digitalize, we want to decarbonize, we want to electrify, but we don't want mining. That needs to come from mining. So where do you feel this? Do you feel this tension's changing? Is this heading in the right way?
I think it's changing a little bit. I think people still don't get this if it's not grown as mind. I don't think most younger people, I'm talking about younger people now, I don't think most younger people get that. But I think there is a growing recognition. But electrification, which is good, needs, it needs mining. There's a growing recognition of that. And you look at, I suppose, one thing I've seen, which is off topic, I know a little bit, but a bit of an anecdote as well. But look, one thing I've seen in my time is the misunderstanding about what the mining industry does and its footprint and the GDP and a small footprint compared, and the only industry that rehabilitates afterwards, right? So I was just going to say that if you look at pictures of mining, it's all trees being cut down and big holes in the ground. But you don't get a lot of the rehabilitation. No. And as you say, what other industry does that?
I live in a place called Queensland, and 90% of is for farming and agriculture, right? It kind of That's what, and you go down all the different industries on disturbance, and mining's like 0.01, but it cops all the attention. It does. But and I feel from my side when I look at it, and I've tried to understand it myself. It's like, how have we not, we're the most important industry. Every other industry relies on us, right? But we've got the worst reputation in the industry of anyone, and we only really rehabilitate. But yeah, why have we got to this point, and how as an industry can we kind of change?
And of course, things have improved. There's no question. Yeah. But mining is, especially underground mining, I mean, it is a dangerous, things will happen, right? But everybody knows when someone dies, when there's a mining accident and someone dies, and obviously that's extremely unfortunate. But if you look at the number of people that die in mining compared with the number of people that die building homes, or roofers falling off roofs, or just in daily life, driving your car, it's not an extreme number, and it's definitely got better. I mean, let's face it, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if you weren't in, North America, Canada, maybe Chile, people didn't really put safety at the top of the list. But that's changed dramatically. I mean, even when you go to a mine in the middle of Congo or something, there's safety protocols, and most mining companies have safety, as their number one, objective.
Yeah.
So I think as an industry, it's getting much better. But the problem is, it's like a lot of things, what makes news? It makes news if there's a mining accident and someone's killed. It makes news if you build a pit and you have to move houses. People have to move, and there's some people that don't want to move. That makes news. It really doesn't make news if you have
in the mining industry, when something bad happens, it's spectacular, right?
Yeah.
A tail sand failure, or caves, or whatever it is. It's when they do something catastrophic, they do something catastrophic.
Yeah, and that's just inherent in the business. But I like to tell people, it's a bit like an airplane. When an airplane crashes, 100 people die. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. But it's headlines, obviously.
Yeah.
But 100 people a day die on the road in Toronto or in Canada. Nobody bats an eyelid. It's just part of the course.
Yeah. So linking this back to your world, like the world you're passionate about, the investment into it, what's happening with mining investments, where's that going? How you attract more people in it? Do you feel that this perception of the industry is blocking a lot of investment that should be coming into the industry?
I think it's blocking some, particularly, with the huge emphasis more in Europe than more in Europe than in the US, for sure, the ESG and all that. But I think the growing recognition of the need for critical metals and minerals, and the growing recognition that an awful lot of those minerals and metals come from China, or we're dependent on China for refining, that story is really opening a new audience, if you like.
Yeah.
So when you hear people, I'll just say like Elon Musk talking about it, that has a different impact than when even Robert Friedland talks about it. He's obviously a dynamic speaker, but, we're now talking to people who are not traditional mining investors, would never dream of investing in mining, but there's a growing recognition that, hey, wait a minute, we need these metals.
Yeah.
From copper on downwards. We need them.
I've been hearing this a lot at this conference. So we're obviously at PDAC at the moment, and there's been a bit of a theme going around. I'm used to going to conferences, and it's a lithium theme, it's a gold theme, it's this. But the last few years, I've seen a lot of build up towards this copper theme. There's been a lot of talk about copper, and I suppose the role of precious metals is playing with uncertainty in this world. But some basic copper. Why such a focus in, I suppose, what are you seeing, a focus in gold and copper at the moment? Are you seeing the same thing, or?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, copper obviously is close to all-time highs or at all-time highs. It's only soft in comparison with gold and silver, so it's doing very well. But I think there's you just keep repeating the same message, which is that if we're going to electrify, and if we're going to use EVs, and now if we're going to build out data farms, we are simply going to need more copper, and we do not have enough.
Yeah.
And the thing about copper, you know this better than I do, obviously. But the thing about copper is you have very, very high visibility on 5 and 7 years out. I mean, I like, because of the length of time it takes, forget about from initial exploration to a resource. You know, I can take 80 years in the case of Grasberg, but forget about that. But just from the point when you have a resource till the time when you start production is maybe 15 years. And I remember talking with Richard Atkinson when he was CEO of Freeport. He's now Chairman Emeritus, I think.
Yeah.
See? But anyway, when he was CEO, and we were talking, I was asking him about, you know, I just heard you talk about the shortage of copper and how we're going to need all this copper and so on. This was 5-7 years ago. And yet you don't have any new, you know, you don't have any new copper mines. Why aren't you progressing your copper mines further? And anyway, that was the conversation. But one of the things he said to me that just absolutely, well, it blew my mind, but it's really stuck with me.
Yeah.
He said, we've got shovel-ready projects, permits and everything, shovel-ready. And if the board of directors gave us a go-ahead tomorrow morning, it will be 5 years before they produce. Yeah. And I thought, and that just goes to the point that we can look 5 years ahead, and we're unlikely to have any major source of production in 5 years that we don't already know about. You know, there might be something that we didn't expect to come on, like resolution. There might be, some mines might do better than we thought they would do. But by and large, we've got very strong visibility 5 years out. And the point I make to people, if you look at the projections for electrification, for EV, for data farms, and forget about all the, you know, all the pipes and plumbing that are copper's bread and butter. Even if you cut those projections in half, we simply don't have enough copper at today's price. We just don't have it.
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, the mining industry, you go back to the Industrial Revolution, right? And then all the way through this, the mining industry and humans have had this amazing ability to supply what the world needs, right? And
Yes.
It's been extraordinary. And yeah, it's you put the challenge to humans, and they solve, and they've done it over and over again. And I'll put this into the story. I talked to a guy called Russ Ellie yesterday. So he was head of Rio Tinto's North and South American generative program. And I asked him about copper. I said, where was, you know, you run this program back in 2010, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, when did copper become a thing for the majors? And he said, back then, like 2015, even 2010, the three main commodities they looked at was copper. And I said, well, it's so interesting for me because now the market's waking up to it 15 years later. And you just made a comment, it takes another 15 years to actually get these things into production. So how do we deal with that? Like, is it a funding issue? Is it where?
No, I don't think it's funding. I think there's three ways we deal with it. And one obviously is at certain prices, you get substitution.
Yes.
We're already beginning to see that with silver and solar panels, where people are trying to, well, first of all, you try to be more efficient with your silver. So you use less, and then you look for substitution. And, you know, I'm not a geologist like Joe, who you just had. But I think it's fair to say that at the right ratio of prices, you can always find a substitute.
Yes.
It's just a matter of what are the relative prices. And when silver was $5 and $10 and $20, nobody really cared about it, but
now
but now they do. And so I think that's one thing. You'll start to see substitution, or perhaps not substitution, but more efficiency.
Yeah.
Again, when a price is so low, you don't care about waste. So that's one thing. I think the other thing that's very clear is, I think it's clear. Some people would disagree. For projections for EV usage, for projections for data farms in particular, are just so grossly overblown.
Okay, so you think there'll be less built?
Yeah, well, look, technology, the history of technology, right, is to become more efficient, become smaller and more efficient.
Okay.
Just think of my cell phone.
Cell phone, you used to walk around with the brick.
And think of the computing power that's in a cell phone today.
Yeah.
So that's the history of technology. So I think a lot of these 4 million acre data farms, by the time they're permitted and built, they probably will only need 2 million or 1 million.
Yeah. Okay.
I also think you're going to get a lot of the companies who have announced these, 40, 50 billion dollar projects. Meta spending 80% of its cash flow on data farms, and that's not even its business. So I think you're going to get a lot of companies drop out of it.
Yeah, okay.
Well, especially company, I don't know about Meta in particular, but Meta, which is an asset-light company generating, tremendous margins on its low assets, getting into a very, very asset-heavy business. Maybe at some point there'll be a stumble, and maybe at some point they'll decide, well, this was the wrong direction to go. So, but things are just going to get more efficient, in my view. And the other part of that, of course, is that if all the projections for data farms in the US, I don't know what it's like in Australia, I imagine much the same, but if all the projections for these data farms in the US, if they actually came to fruition, well, wait a minute. We don't have enough copper to build them. We don't have enough copper and silver to build them. We don't have enough power to run them. So you can't build the things if you can't run them.
So we can, even if we find the copper, where's the power coming from? And it's,
Yeah, so I think the projections are overdone. And then as you mentioned, human ingenuity, and that is fabulous. There'll be, we know, you know better than I, but we know that, companies are working on different projects for copper extraction and copper refining. You think back to the gold mining. I'm old enough to remember when heap leach was a brand new discovery, right?
Yeah, wow.
Well, think what that did. Heap leach enabled a whole bunch of gold deposits
projects BI economic
to now become, and we're going to see something.
Yeah, okay.
In the copper business. I'm sure we will. Sure we will. I don't know what it is. I'm not a technical person. But, human ingenuity is a fabulous thing.
It is. And linking then back to your day, like what do you do in your day-to-day at the moment? Like what you're in the way you think about investments or the things you get involved in?
Well, first of all, we manage money globally, not just in resources. But if we're sticking with resources,
No, I'm happy to hear. Like, which industries are you looking at and why?
Well, I look at pretty much anything that I think I can understand. So I don't do technology, I don't do biotech, or I don't do pharmaceuticals. But anything I think I can understand, like Nestle, or like, a bank or something that's, straightforward.
Yeah.
Or as... I know it's an old saying, but then I heard it from Dennis Gartman, things that hurt when you drop them on your foot. So we invest in sort of everything.
Okay.
We invest in entertainment companies, banks. I mentioned Nestle. Yeah.
And why resources? Why do you invest in resources?
Well,
you have choice, right? You have choice.
Well, a couple of reasons. One is resource investments obviously gives you potential for 5 and 10 to 1s that are realistic expectations for huge returns that you don't have in other industries.
Yeah.
Other industries that I follow. You do in tech and biotech, but I don't understand those. And I don't know, it's just exciting. Okay. I think it's really exciting. Building something from scratch. That is just... whatever it is, but building something from scratch is really just terribly exciting. So particularly in the mining business, but no, not particularly, everywhere. Every investment I make, I think people are the number one. People are the number one thing. Even, I mentioned Nestle, even a huge company like Nestle, look at the difference between the last 3 CEOs they have. It makes a huge difference who is running the company. HSBC, we used to own. I don't anymore. But again, when they decided, instead of hiring a parsimonious Scotsman who had been with the company for 60 years and knew the culture, instead of doing that, they would go with the tide and hire a slick investment banker from New York.
Yeah.
That's when the company fell apart in my mind. It makes a huge difference who's in charge. And of course,
And what's that character? What are you looking for? Like, what is it? Is there something that you're drawn to?
Obviously, competence, track record, competence, ethics are incredibly important, and also, frankly, an ability or a willingness to communicate honestly with the market. And and that means admitting to mistakes.
Yeah.
When I ask a person, okay, well, that's a really great story. So the final question, the usual question. So what keeps you up at night? What could go wrong? Nothing.
Everything's all good.
Nothing. Yeah. Come on, man.
Yeah.
Have you not thought about your business?
Yeah.
There's got to be something that can go wrong.
Yeah.
And particularly, I can't do it with the CEO of Nestle, but I try to get to know the CEOs and the COOs. I try to get to know them. And even a company like Barrick, Bristow, I've had lunch and dinner with him. It's really good to get to know people when they're not just doing a Zoom call telling you about the company, but how do they act around other people? That's very important to me. I'll just, if I may, just tell you an anecdote that shows the difference.
Yeah.
I remember going on a mining trip once with, it was in Mexico. And when the guys came down, there were maybe 3 of them from Toronto, Vancouver. When they came down, I'll never forget the cook.
What?
She put her hands down. She rubbed her hands on a blanket. She came out and hugged him.
Really?
Happy to see the guy. And everyone was, talking. I went on another mining trip, and I kid you not, there were 3 people. The guy must have had a Brioni suit and Gucci loafers into a mining camp. And everyone sort of turned a bit away and pretended to be doing things.
Yeah.
Nobody rushed out and said hello.
Yeah.
Well, which one's going to get the social license?
Just to operate, yeah.
And that tells you those subtle things, those soft things, to me, are so critical, especially with smaller companies, but even with larger companies.
Yeah.
Again, Nestle. How can you have a company where directors, I was about to use a word I shouldn't use, but where the director's mistress reported him because she found him in a hotel room with yet another woman.
Yeah.
The wife didn't even enter into this particular complaint picture. So how can you have a culture where that's happening
okay.
with people right at the top, and people knew it was happening, but never mind. So, and that's not a prudish comment. I'm just, so things like that are incredibly important in a business.
So good humans. Humans, good communicators, honest people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Decent people.
Yeah. I think it's a backbone to society. So
yeah.
And if you're looking at right now, where you're looking at investments in the market, where are you seeing opportunities? Where are you seeing risks? What are things unfold? Anything that you're curious about, or?
Well, despite gold having done what gold's done, I don't mean today.
Yeah.
But despite gold having just been on a tear for the last 3 years, and particularly the last year, I still think gold is incredibly attractive. I really do. Obviously, it's a little more difficult to buy things at these prices.
How does an average person get exposure to gold? Like,
most ordinary people, ordinary. Sorry, sounds condescending. Most non-resource investors, non-specialists will buy a fund, either the GDX or a mutual fund. And then, of course, you get exposure to the large cap and the small cap. But, you look at even a company like Agnico Eagle, you look at the price to free cash flow, which is my favorite metric.
Yeah.
It's trading at a higher price to free cash flow than it was a year ago. But if you go back to the 10 years before last year, it is trading at a lower multiple today than it has been in those previous years.
Huh.
Now, of course, that's dependent on the margins and the price of gold staying where they are.
Yeah.
You know, if the price of gold drops to 3,000, those metrics will change. But what I'm saying is, if you're bullish on gold, which I am, and I'm bullish on gold because the main buyers, central banks and Tether's very important, and people are not putting enough emphasis on Tether. Tether bought more gold last year than any single central bank. It's meaningful, but both those buyers are likely to continue to buy, and they're both price agnostic. So we're not going to start seeing buying drop off as the price goes up.
Yeah.
So anyway, I'm still very bullish on gold. But for people who, had 20% in gold and there's now 50%, makes sense to sort of trim it a bit and look at other things that aren't so expensive. Copper would be one. Copper's expensive, and the copper stocks are expensive. Well, they've moved up, I should say. They're not. But if you look out 5 years, copper, but also things like uranium, oil, agriculture.
So
agriculture is incredibly cheap.
Yep. There you go. Well, no, it's been great to have a chat, and here's some stories as well. So, look forward to catching up again one day and continuing this. So, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Critical Minerals Intelligence Podcast. If you want to stay ahead of the curve in mining, investment, and the evolving world of critical minerals, make sure you follow along. We bring you the insights, stories, and expertise you won't hear anywhere else. Stay with us as we explore the people, projects, and ideas shaping the future of this essential industry.